right. Well, today we have on Bethany McDaniel, and I just want to lead off with the fact that she gives her guests on her podcast liver smoothies. So I feel like we're like kindred spirits. I have never given anyone a liver smoothie. I would like to. I'm just not. I don't do a podcast on a farm, but I would. But anyway, she is the founder of Primally Pure, which really is an amazing. I want to say it's like a prolific skincare company, like at this point, like in what it does for in terms of natural ingredients from animals and from plants. Bethany, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Eddie. Next time you're in Southern California, you'll have to come to the farm and I'll give you a liver smoothie.
I'm totally down. I was telling you before, I would just liver and salt. I don't even need veggies, berries, nothing.
Wait, have you tried it? Have you tried liver?
Oh, I have, yeah.
Okay,
It's disgusting.
and you don't mind it?
It's
okay. So
well,
you're just,
no, I mind it.
You know, it's.
I'm just
okay.
trying to be.
You're just.
Yeah,
tough.
I'm trying to be like cool for everybody. Yeah, it's terrible. Actually, you know, I've done the whole thing where you like cut it in pieces and freeze it in like an ice cube tray and like try to take it like that so you don't have to taste it because it's
just
disgusting.
Swallow it. Well, that's kind of what I do for the smoothie. I like puree it,
nice.
And then I put it in ice cube trays, and then I just like pop a couple of those into the blender with some other ingredients for the smoothie. So it hides it really well. When I blend it with like berries and mint leaves, like you can kind of mask the taste. But yeah, on its own,
that's great.
It's really bad, but it's so nutrient dense. It's worth it to incorporate into your diet if you can find like the right way to disguise it that works for you.
Well, I'd love to actually ask you a little bit more about like that topic around like that, you know, eating health, all those sort of things. But let's start with your story, because the way you began Primally Pure and sort of, you know, meeting your husband and the fact that he's a farmer and all of that kind of and earlier in your story and all your products and your issues. I'd love to hear about that, and that'll kind of set the stage for getting into our conversation. So why don't you start there with your story?
Yeah. So as a teenager, I struggled with acne on and off, and I went the conventional route to treat it. I remember my mom taking me to the dermatologist in junior high and high school, and I was prescribed all kinds of topical creams and ointments and even antibiotics. I was on several rounds of antibiotics for the acne, which is such a disservice. Dermatologists are still doing this, and it's really problematic because maybe it helps a little bit in the short term to, you know, cut down some of the bad bacteria that may be contributing to the acne, but long term, it is only going to exacerbate the problem, because when you take antibiotics, not only do they wipe out the bad bacteria in your gut, they also wipe out the good bacteria in your gut, and that can lead to, you know, a really disrupted gut long term, and also worse acne in the skin long term. And that was definitely the case with me. And I just went through this journey with my assistant also, who had was on several different acne medications for the last 10 years, and we kind of put this plan together, her and I, to get her off of all these medications. And Taylor Dukes, who you've had on, is one of my good friends, helped her in this process too. And once we did some testing, we found that her gut was just in such bad shape from being on antibiotics for several years. And so it kills me that dermatologists are still prescribing these for acne. And then, you know, the different creams and ointments that I was on, some of them helped short term, but I was also a lifeguard. I was doing competitive swimming at the time. And so just the sun mixed with the chlorine, mixed with these medications, like it just made my skin really, really sensitive. And my skin barrier was really compromised for years and years and years. And it wasn't until later on in college, I was working at Trader Joe's at the time, and a friend of mine, a coworker, said, "Have you ever tried jojoba oil for your skin?" And as someone who had always dealt with oily skin and acne, I thought, I'm not putting oil on my skin. Like that's my problem. My skin's too oily. But what I didn't realize was that I was using all these harsh products on my skin that was totally stripping my skin barrier and then causing my skin to overproduce oil. So once I started using jojoba oil, at first I found that my skin was more balanced than it ever had been with all of the conventional products that I was using. So that was kind of the first light bulb for me. And then I met my husband my senior year of college, and he was kind of in the process with his dad and brothers of starting this regenerative livestock farm at the time. And that kind of opened my eyes to a new way of eating whole foods. I'd grown up on processed foods. And once I switched to a whole food diet, I noticed that not only did I feel better overall, but my skin was clearing up so much. And I kind of just went full throttle at that, really changed my diet kind of overnight. And then I started looking at like other areas of my life, other areas that I could clean up. And skincare and personal care products were kind of the next thing that I ventured into. And I was really shocked to find that the products I'd been using my whole life were not safe. I think most of us think that if it's sold on a store shelf that it's been tested by someone, and that's
Right.
actually not the case. So there's tens of thousands of different chemical ingredients out there, and not only have most of these not been tested, but a lot of the ones that have been tested have been shown to be carcinogenic or hormone disrupting, but they're still allowed to be used in products. And so it's kind of like this big experiment that we're all partaking in unknowingly, and it's not going well. Like, if most of us have heard by now different stats on the skyrocketing rates of sickness and disease in America. And I think this is a huge part of that. I think it's a lot of things. It's our environment, it's food, but it's also the products we're using. And so I was just researching all of this. This was almost 12, 13 years ago that I got into this, and there weren't a whole lot of natural options available back then. And so I just kind of thought, well, I'm going to just start like making my own and trying to figure out how to make clean and natural and effective skincare products. So I started doing this as a hobby, and deodorant was like the first thing that I really dove into, because I was just using coconut oil and baking soda on my underarms, but I wanted my husband to start doing that. And he was like, no, that's weird. I'm not going to like rub something on my armpits. So I was like, okay, I need to figure out how to make natural deodorant in stick form. And he was like my test subject. And once I had a formula that worked for him and that he liked, I was like, okay, maybe this is something that could be useful for more people. And I eventually started selling it along with a few other products on the Primal Pastures website. That's the name of the farm. And got a really good response. I was really blown away. In the beginning, I was only trying to kind of make a little bit of supplemental money for us. And based on the response, it just like fueled me to keep going and to kind of keep taking it to the next level. And that was 10 years ago that I officially launched Primally Pure. And now we, it's changed so much. We have over 100 employees. We have a 30,000 square foot headquarters here in Temecula, the Spot, our headquarters. And it's really wild when I look back to think about where it started and where it is today.
Well, the vision and mission that you have is obviously extraordinary. It resonates with a lot of people. It's resonating with my family. My 12-year-old's gotten a benefit from some of your products. I think
Nice.
what's cool about it is when you're passionate about something and you see the change happen yourself. That's like that fuel to the fire. And I just hearing your stories almost too typical. I mean, most people are doing exactly what you're doing. They're going to the doctor. They've got some acne issue. They've got some stomach issue. They go to the doctor. They get some pill. They get some antibiotics. It doesn't work. And most people just kind of go with their whole life going, well, I guess I'm just going to have to take these pills. What sort of was like that moment for you where you're like, oh, like I could actually change this myself? Was it the moment with the farm and your husband going, oh man, this food's actually helping me? What was that thing?
Yeah, there were a lot of little moments. And even like looking back to when I was seeing the dermatologist in junior high and high school, I remember asking, is there anything that I could be doing differently about my lifestyle? I kind of knew intuitively there had to be a root cause. There had to be some way to heal from this other than taking prescription medications and using prescription creams on my skin. And she looked at me and she said, nope, there's nothing you can do. This is purely genetic and this is your only option. And so I kind of thought, okay, I guess, this is what the dermatologist is saying. And I didn't really have a way to look into it more at the time. And so I just went with that. But then, once the coworker recommended the jojoba oil, and then once I started learning about the power of eating real food, it just kind of all clicked for me. And I was like, oh, none of what I've been doing makes sense, nor is it like a true lasting solution. And maybe it is possible to heal this in a more natural, holistic way.
Most people don't even think really about skincare beyond the fact that, oh, it makes my skin look better. If you watch like, if you're around in the early or the late 90s and you see these commercials, you'd be like, oh, you should get some Noxema or some like oxy pads or whatever, and that'll
Yes.
clear up your acne. And that's kind of like the depth of like, as far as people, I'm like remembering a Jennifer Love Hewitt commercial with Neutrogena or something where it's like you could look like her. And
Yeah, I remember those.
but there's like, yeah, okay, so I'm not crazy that actually existed. So why do you think it's actually important for people to legitimately care about this issue now? I know that it's beyond cosmetic, but like, why is this a crucial part of like your overall health?
Yeah, I mean, we can't separate the skin from the health of our whole body. And so I think it's really convenient for marketers to sell products and with the message of this one product is going to cure your acne or wrinkles or fill in the blank. But our skin is a part of our whole system. We can't disconnect the two. So even us as a natural skincare company who like wants people to use our products and wants to sell products, education about overall health is a huge part of our philosophy because it has to be both. Like you have to pay attention to what you're eating, your environment, as well as the products that you're putting on your skin, because all of it plays a part in your health and therefore in the health of your skin, because your overall health is going to be reflected in the health of your skin. And so yeah, it's about what we eat. It's about our sleep. It's about our lifestyles. It's about the products we use. It's everything. It's not just products. And I feel like we would be doing our customers a huge disservice if we only tried to sell products without pairing that with education on how to be a healthy person overall.
Yeah, that's really good. It's a fight we're fighting on multiple fronts. It's not just on the skin, but it's from within as well. I have to ask about what you think about personally as like the sort of the motivators behind most of your traditional, skincare companies, or even like household items in their companies, like what their primary motivation is. Do you think their primary motivation is to help you to clear your acne? Is it to make you a better human? Is it profit? Like, what do you think some of these like larger, bigger companies' primary motivations are? Maybe
Yeah,
that's
I
too
think
big of a
that's
question.
no, it's not. I think that's something that a lot of people are kind of thinking about now, not just with skincare, but with like big food and all of these big industries. Like, are they out to get us? Do they actually want us to be sick so that we are like, so that we're a lifetime customer of like the system? And like once you need a drug for one thing, maybe it causes other issues and you need more drugs for that. So, I mean, that's like another topic, and I think there may be some validity to that, but I think overall people are motivated by selling products and by profit, and they're not necessarily thinking about like wanting their customers to be healthy, thriving individuals. And so they sell products that have these toxic ingredients that are not only are they like not really helping out with whatever skin issue they claim to help out with long term, but they're also filled with products that disrupt hormones, that are carcinogenic. And as
Wow.
most of us know, like when our hormones aren't working properly, like that is going to be reflected in the health of our skin. And so things like parabens and phthalates, like these most conventional skincare products are packed with these ingredients. And fragrance is another one. There's so many ingredients that we could focus on, but overall the theme is like these things are not helping your health as a whole. And when our body isn't healthy, our skin isn't going to look healthy. And so like how can we
Yeah.
choose products that have like pure ingredients that are also really effective, that don't have all of these cheap fillers and emulsifiers and preservatives. It's harder to formulate products that way. It's not as easy. With natural products, it's like you have to figure out natural ways to preserve them. And we make everything in house so that we don't have to use harsh preservatives. We can get products out to customers more quickly rather than having them sit in a warehouse for who knows how long before they actually get into the hands of the customer. I mean, there's a lot more that goes into it when you're actually like thinking about your customer and like wanting your customer to to thrive and to be healthy, that these big corporations just like are not set up to do.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's multiple, certainly there's multiple motivating factors, but the economics of it all has to be one of them, especially when large corporations own some of these companies and there's shell companies, and their primary motivation is oftentimes, growth and profit margins. And so some of these ingredients are really cheap. They're really easy to make. And but you said something that was also interesting. Like, so some of these products may not actually help the actual thing they say they help. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I think I experienced that for sure with the products that I used. Like you mentioned, some of those ads. I feel like the late '90s, early 2000s, like, gosh, like we were just marketed to so heavily by, I can like name all these. I mean, St. Ives apricot scrub, like Clean and Clear, Neutrogena, like these products that, like I mentioned earlier, they really like disrupt the skin's barrier. And the barrier is so, having like a healthy moisture barrier in the skin is so important for for preventing acne, for preventing premature aging. Like, but it was so in vogue back then to just like strip the skin, of everything, get rid of all the oil, and like that just makes the problem worse. And so yeah, I think like the marketing is so terrible. And now on the flip side, people are becoming aware of this stuff, which is good, but companies now recognize that, and they're selling products that are maybe a little less toxic but still very greenwashed, and making promises that just aren't held up when you actually look at the ingredient list. Like something that's really that I'm seeing a lot of companies do are saying like made with coconut oil or made with essential oils, but then you look at the ingredient label and that's like maybe the 20th ingredient under all of these chemicals. And so I think people need to be aware of these like greenwashing tactics too, because more people do want clean products, which is great, but the companies know that now and they're finding workarounds for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you change the package brown or something and put a green leaf on it. Yeah. Like, oh, this is natural because it's a brown bottle.
All the little icons, cruelty free, tested by a dermatologist. Like that literally means the dermatologist just took a swab of the product on someone's skin. Doesn't mean it has to go through any sort of approval process. They just have to test it, and they can put the, dermatologist tested icon on there. So there's so many little things that just don't mean anything, but most people don't realize that. And it's sad because people are wanting to make good choices, but it's hard nowadays.
It is hard. And I'm glad that there's, resources like your podcast. There's all sorts of this, there's a lot of big movement in the sort of health empire. If you keep your ear to the ground or whatever, there's lots going on in that space online, and people are more apt to, certainly there's a little bit of distrust there with like bigger organizations, companies, government agencies, but also there's just a lot more voices in it. And so there's just less this like singular voice telling you need Neutrogena deep clean body wash or something. I think it's hilarious. You brought it up, and the fact that you would strip your skin, as you said, and then bring on the back end of that, it's like, well, now I'm really dry, so I'm going to get this lotion that's also filled with whatever, and then put that on there, and then somehow I'm back.
Right.
It's pretty wild to think about. What about things in the environment? As someone who's married, my wife, she's had drawers and drawers of different things like makeup. Do you have makeup? Have you ever considered doing like makeup products? Is that something that you've considered?
We get asked about that a lot. I don't want to say never, maybe sometime in the future, but it is like a whole new world that, to venture into. And I'm still so involved in the formulation of our products that just sounds like a lot to take on right now.
Sure.
And I've, 3 kids and like just have a lot more going on in life besides Primally Pure, although it is something that I'm extremely passionate about and very involved in. So maybe, but it's not on the radar currently.
Yeah. And
there's some brands that are doing a good job of that too. There's OG is one that I'm really liking right now. OGEE is doing a good job.
Okay. Yeah, I'm glad that's out there. I mean, I had a guy named Andy Nilo on who started a company called Olatura. Which is
I listened to that episode. It was great.
Oh, cool. Yeah, Andy's been a friend for a while, and hearing his heart on, all of the things that ladies leave the house with, particularly around the perfumes and the makeups and how
many
they're,
things.
yeah, so many things.
And like I said earlier, like these ingredients haven't been tested in it like by themselves, but then when you think about the layers of products that we're using, so like not only have the ingredients not been tested as individual ingredients for safety, they also haven't been tested for safety in combination with one another. We're applying 168 different chemicals is what the average woman applies to her body every single day. And that stat was from, I think, 2014. So I'm sure that's increased since then. And we're just not thinking about what that is doing long term. And when you think about the rising rates of infertility, fertility is declining by 1% every year. And I'm not saying that this is the sole cause, but it's something to consider. It's a factor that's within our control. There's a lot of things about our environment nowadays that we can't control, but this is something that we do have a say in. And so I think it's just something that's so important for everyone to take ownership of and to really take inventory of in their own lives. That doesn't mean you have to do a complete overhaul of your life and your products overnight, but it's something to be aware of. It's not something to just kind of like set on a shelf, because if you do, I think it's just only going to hurt you in the long term.
So you use a few different ingredients in your products that, when I mentioned to some of my friends, like, hey, you got to try this product, it's really awesome. They're like, well, I'm really trying to be like conscious about like what I use, like what's in it. And it's like, well, there's like tallow in it. And they're like, wait, yeah. What? Like, that's weird, right? Like, why doesn't it have like a weird bunch of hydro something and a bunch of letters and numbers at the end? Like, why? So talk a little bit about some of the ingredients you use, like some of the fats and oils that you've touched on. Like, why do you use those? Why are those better alternatives than, say, some of the stuff that strips off your skin?
Yeah. You mentioned tallow, and that's probably the one that we are getting the most publicity for right now as a company, which is so wild. Like I was telling you earlier, I started out wanting to use tallow, but I wasn't sure it would catch on with people. And I found out about tallow because of my husband's farm, and I just became really intrigued by this ingredient. It's something that has been used ancestrally for, since the beginning of time, and other animal fats as well. And it's very similar to our skin's natural oil that it produces, our sebum. Tallow actually means sebum in Latin. It's filled with so many amazing essential fatty acids. It's really biocompatible to the skin, really easily absorbed and utilized. And so it's an ultra nourishing, ultra safe ingredient. And it's like becoming kind of trendy now, which I never could have predicted. I mean, when I started out, like vegan skincare was popular. And so I was like, ugh, right. I don't know if people will get this. I don't know if they'll be into it, but I just believed in it so much that I wanted to put it in our products nonetheless. And I'd experienced the positive impacts that it had on my skin. And so I was really excited about using it. And I'm so glad I did, because now it's like almost becoming mainstream to where tallow is kind of like the cool ingredient now, which just blows my mind. So that's one that we're kind of the most known for. And then we have a few other really cool, we use a lot of great essential oils. Astaxanthin is an antioxidant derived from algae that's 6,000 times stronger than vitamin C. We use that in our plumping serum and in our antioxidant balm. Those are two of our best-selling products. That's probably one of my favorite ingredients that we use. We also use bakuchiol, which is a natural retinol alternative, and we use that in our plumping mask and plumping, I believe also our plumping serum as well. And so it works the same as retinol in terms of how it can smooth fine lines and prevent fine lines, but it doesn't come with the same like sensitizing harsh effects that retinols do. So, nature, like God has put a lot of great ingredients in nature that are pretty transformative, and I don't think that we need all of the synthetics. I think that those have been like readily available and cheap and easy to formulate with, and but yeah, I think there's a natural alternative for almost every synthetic out there.
I think I'm trying to remember what book it was in. It might have been in Kate Shanahan's book, the Dark Calories book, but she talked about the history of soap and how that used to be animal fat primarily,
Yeah,
and when there was a
yes.
shortage, they turned to. So it wasn't that long ago we were actually using
It wasn't.
animal fat for soap.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened?
Yeah.
Like you know, it's this weird. It's weird how it all sort of shifted very quickly over the course of
Yeah.
125-ish years. That now all of a sudden
It
we're like, oh,
is.
animal fat. That's super weird.
I know. Yeah, it hasn't been that long. And animal products have really been demonized in the last several decades. And, we get people that do think it's weird, but it's like, if you're someone who is omnivorous, who eats animal and plant-based nutrients, like why would the same philosophy not apply to the skin as well? Like plants and animals have unique nutrients when we consume them internally and also when we put them on the skin. So that's why we use both. We use nutrients from plants and from animals because they do different things and they provide different benefits.
That's so good. Well, like the skin's an organ, I don't know where it got this like sterilization deal that, I don't know when that happened. But just kind of looking back on history and seeing like, okay, got to use hand sanitizer and make sure everything's
Yes.
clean and sterile. That includes all the skin, scrub it. You get this industrial shampoo in your head to get rid of all the germs. And there's microbacteria that's all over these, and it's all necessary. And so atom bombing it in the same way you talked about the antibiotic in the gut, taking out all the good bacteria with the bad is the sort of opportunity cost of, getting clean. And there's a detriment. And you brought up fertility, certainly rates of cancer that are starting to go up really significantly. These are all really like, we've got to ask the question, like, why are people infertile? Like, why is this happening, at the rate it is? It's curious.
Totally. Yeah. And I think like something I've been thinking about a lot lately is just we can't continue living in this way and living like in the world in terms of food and skincare and personal care and cleaning products and all these things and expect a different outcome than what most of the general public is experiencing. Like we can't expect to not be a part of these really sad and scary statistics if we're doing the same things that everyone else is doing. So like we have to have the courage to live differently if we want to experience a different outcome for ourselves and for our kids.
It's so good. The sort of the impetus for this podcast is that, the way God made everything is the best way. That's the impetus. And so it's not to say like invention or innovation can't happen. It's just that, interacting with the world as close to the way God made it as possible is typically the best. And, when you think about something like a GMO, that like acronym could be like God move over. That's the kind of like a common fun phrase that people like to say, but it's
heard
like,
that.
People, really?
Good.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's like
that's
people
good.
getting their hands in it. Yeah. People are getting their
Yeah.
hands in the world and going like, I'm going to change and manipulate and twist this, and I think it's going to be better. And not only that, I'm going to make
Bill
a lot of
Gates.
money off of it. Yes, exactly. Let's just get rid of meat and produce it in a weird lab, and I'm sure it'll taste fine. I'll be dead by the time we find that out, but like,
Yeah.
good luck
And
with
everyone
that
eat
sort of
bugs.
thing.
It's the same as beef. It's fine.
Oh gosh, man, you've heard about that too. Okay, so I can rant about Bill Gates. I know he's really popular in Seattle where I'm at. So,
Oh,
but
sorry.
it's
Sorry,
no, it's well, it's so true though, right?
No, we can't
like
play God. And we'll
That's right.
never do it better. We'll never do it better.
That's right. And it goes for the skincare stuff. So you got this like science experiment. You're like, oh, some marketer told me this is going to work for my face and I'm going to rub that on my face, but it's not working. And now take an antibiotic and do this, this, and this. Oh, it's genetic. So there's nothing you can do about it. And pretty soon I'm a depressed 20-year-old after going through 10 years of puberty and acne, and I don't know what to do. Meanwhile, I'm eating Nabisco crackers and Doritos and, I'm having Fruit Loops for breakfast and I'm using Noxema pads or whatever, and nothing's working. It's frustrating.
Totally. Yeah. It's crazy. And like, it's interesting as a parent. I think about this a lot with my kids because we're careful about what our kids eat and what they're exposed to. And we do our best in all of those areas to like protect them from toxic exposures. But it's so weird because that's almost seen as weird nowadays when it's like, or maybe it's seen
Yes.
as like extreme or over the top. like, why won't you let them have goldfish or Cheetos? This is normal. Like, no, it's not normal. Like, it's common, but it's not normal. It's normal to like eat the things that people have been eating, you know, for since the beginning of time, aside from the last century. Like, that's what's normal. So I think it's odd that trying to like live in a way that doesn't necessarily conform to these like societal norms that most people are abiding by nowadays is seen as like extreme.
Yeah, I just, man, you're gonna have me rant, but the fact
Yes.
that they are so clever that they've gotten to the point to convince the general public that eating their literal junk nonstop and inducing cravings with bioengineering and hijacking your hormones and your biology. And then they've done such a good job at it to convince you that it's not normal to eat beef that's grass fed or wild caught fish or animal or plants that are grown organically. That is a crime against humanity. It's so insidious that they've done that. And I guess well done on them, but that is so frustrating. So,
Yeah.
and
they're getting
as someone
lifelong customers at an early age.
yes, and then yes, in cahoots with the pharmaceutical. I mean, yeah, this could go. We could go tinfoil hat real quick.
Yeah.
But what you mentioned, Bill Gates, as a family that has a farm. What is your perception of hearing people say we need to eliminate the types of agriculture that you guys do so in order to save the planet? How does that hit you?
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's upsetting. It's like scary to think about all of the farmland in the central US that Bill Gates has purchased. And a lot of this messaging is just not true. I mean, there's this idea that beef production is like contributing to greenhouse gas emissions and global warming. First of all, that isn't even like top of the list when you look at like greenhouse gas emissions or whatnot. But second of all, like regenerative farming is the opposite of conventional farming and actually sequesters carbon from the atmosphere, creates more biodiverse soil that then can in turn grow healthy crops for longer. Like all of the crops in the central US, like the soy, the corn, all of these things like are completely depleting the soil of nutrients to where that soil is going to be rendered completely ineffective and incapable of growing anything. I've heard estimations that there's another, I can't remember the exact number, but I want to say around like 40 to 60 crop cycles more that the soil can take before it's just done. And so regenerative farming actually like restores health and biodiversity in the soil so that it can sustain more crops for longer. And so, yeah, the idea that we just need to like produce more corn and soy and put that into like fake meat products and that's gonna be what saves everyone is just, it's so short-sighted and it's just a total lie.
So your family hasn't switched over to Beyond Burger Meat, is what you're saying?
No, never, never. Ugh, it's so bad. Have you looked at the ingredients? It's so bad.
Yes, it's disgusting. It's dystopian, is what it is. It feels very like this is 2098, and you know the world's come to an end, and Bill Gates' era has taken over, and there is nothing but meat pods growing in labs, and the soil has zero ingredients.
No one wants to eat that. No one wants to eat it. Like the amount of marketing that has gone into trying to sell it to people, and I think it's like not doing well even in spite of that. Like in the last like year or so, it just speaks to like no one wants that.
No one likes it. Like dogs won't eat it.
And the people that
like,
do, the people that are like forcing themselves to stomach it and thinking that they're doing something good for themselves and the planet. I mean, usually they come around in a few years and they're like, no, that didn't work for me actually.
Oh, I can imagine some of the autoimmune conditions that are produced. We had a friend that was doing the vegan thing, and they were lots of tortilla chips and Beyond Burger Meat was sort of the solution to be healthy, and it just produced so much like eczema, lots of different things, and finally made the switch back over to something like closer to, your typical like paleo bulletproofy sort of carnivore sort of style
Yeah.
diet, and they got healthy. And so you can kind of just see
Yeah.
that play itself out.
Yeah. Yeah. You
All
see
right,
that a
I want to
lot.
ask. Yeah, exactly. So I want to ask about deodorant real quick. I totally got off track and we ranted about Bill Gates, but deodorant is something that like people are sort of at least basically aware of. Hey, listen, you should probably be careful because, such and such person got breast cancer. But, aluminum comes to mind. Some of these other ingredients come to mind. Why is deodorant? You started there. Why was that sort of where you started? And where have you seen like your traditional deodorants go wrong? And why is something like your product more helpful?
Yeah, I think when I was initially doing research, deodorant seemed like the most problematic, like personal care, skincare, whatever product on the shelves, and that's why I wanted to start with that. So first off, like antiperspirants, the idea that we should stop ourselves from sweating is flawed in and of itself. Like our skin is a detoxification organ. It's one of the ways that our body gets rid of toxins is through sweat. And so when we're blocking our pores and our underarms from sweating, we're preventing the release of toxins that need to be released. And so traditional antiperspirants have aluminum, which you mentioned. And not only is that problematic because it blocks your pores, but it's also been linked to Alzheimer's disease. It's a heavy metal. It's not good for us. And so we're putting that into our body in a place that is really absorptive, really sensitive next to breast tissue, next to lymph nodes. Parabens are another problematic ingredient. There was one study that found that 98% of the breast cancer tumors that were sampled had parabens in them. And then fragrance is another. I mean, fragrance is a blanket term that can include up to 3,000 different chemicals. It's protected by the FDA as a trade secret, so companies don't have to disclose what's in their fragrance. But the EPA did a study and found that 72% of the ingredients in fragrance had phthalates, which are endocrine disrupting chemicals. Traditional deodorant just has tons of different chemicals that do a lot of different, can cause a lot of damage. And we're applying it in a really sensitive, absorptive area. And so I always say, if you're going to swap one thing, let it be deodorant. Just start with deodorant, and then kind of go from there.
That's great advice. Yeah, deodorant is something that is people are, I've talked to many different people on that, and people would say, oh, I know it's important, but yet, you still got the Old Spice stick or like the ladies speed stick thing going. And yet rates of breast cancer clearly affected. I guess the question is like, what's the point of deodorant? Is it to not sweat or is it to not smell? And could you address those things like differently? Is that possible? Like your
Yeah,
diet, let's say.
yeah. I think like the healthier you are, the less you will stink. And so it's interesting when people switch to natural deodorant, they usually will purge for a little while. And so they'll be extra sweaty, extra smelly for like a couple of weeks, and then it will kind of balance out because you've been storing all these toxins in your underarms and you're finally allowing them to be released. And so that's normal. We tell that to our customers, like expect to be a little extra sweaty, stinky for the first few weeks. And people can do, a clay mask under in your armpits to kind of help pull out some of those toxins. We have a deodorant that has activated charcoal in it to kind of like on a continual basis, just lightly kind of pull out toxins from your underarms. And then sweating frequently is something that helps with that too. So if you have an infrared sauna or if you can do like a heavy workout and really break a sweat, that's going to be helpful for just overall detoxification and it'll help you to not like sweat and smell as much on a regular basis too. And then eating a clean diet, minimizing the
Yeah.
toxins that you're taking in, all of that plays a role.
Yeah. So if you eat a bunch of McDonald's and, you know, junk food,
Mm-hmm.
you smell more. Like that's the
Mm-hmm.
reality of it. And it's like, it's hard to imagine,
Overconsume alcohol.
yeah. So alcohol is one. So I didn't know that. So
Yeah,
overconsumption of alcohol could produce like, smelly. So you won't
for
smell as
sure.
bad if you change your diet and also get something natural to use under your arms, which is really good. And, we've got 3 daughters at my house. And so especially for the oldest, but using those natural deodorants like yours is so much is helpful for them, especially at an early age. We've have a
Yeah.
history of cancer in my family. And so, or back in my, especially on the women's side. And so we're more conscious about that than I think a lot of people.
Great. Setting the stage early.
Yeah, sure. So you mentioned infrared sauna. I've heard you talk about some of your like fun hacks before.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know. I always ask most folks, I try to get to it. Like, what is the fun thing couple things you're doing right now just to stay healthy, stay engaged, stay hacked? What are those things?
I love this
Do you have an
question.
infrared sauna, I assume? Do
Yeah,
you?
I
Okay.
do. Yeah, we have a whole biohacking garage kind of set up. So we have an infrared sauna,
Yes.
we have a PEMF mat, we have a hyperbaric chamber,
Yes.
we have an ozone generator. So these are just kind of things that we've like slowly collected and accumulated over time. And we really see this as like health insurance, like a health insurance policy, so that we don't have to later like get sick and go through all that. I mean, who knows? But we believe in like kind of doing what we can to minimize the chances of, or prevent disease as best as we can. And so it's just kind of like a fun hobby for us to like invest in these sorts of things. But I would say like out of all of the things that we have, I think that infrared sauna is probably my favorite. And I mean, the research on sauna use is wild. There was one study done in Finland where people sauna regularly in Finland. And so they followed a group of people around for like 20 years. And there was a group who did the sauna like one time a week. There was a group who did the sauna, I believe it was like 4 to 5 times a week. And then a group who did the sauna, I want to say like every day. For the people that use the sauna once a week, they had a 20% decrease in all-cause mortality. And that percentage just went up, like based on the amount of time in the sauna. So I think that the group that saunaed the most had like a 70% decrease in all-cause mortality at the end of the 20 years. So, I mean, it's so,
Wow.
it makes sense. Like you're releasing so many toxins when you sweat in the sauna, actually more toxins than when you exercise even, because when you're in a parasympathetic state, they've measured like the amount of toxins in sweat from the sauna versus sweat from exercise. And
Wow.
you release way more toxins from the sauna than when you, not to say exercise has other benefits too, and you still release toxins when you sweat, when you exercise, but it's just interesting that when you're in a parasympathetic state in the sauna, your body can more readily release toxins via the sweat, and it just feels so good. So I love our infrared
That's awesome.
sauna. And I really like, this is really simple, but like morning walks with a weight vest is kind of like probably the one thing that I like have to do almost every morning unless I really can't do it for some reason. Even if it's just like 10 minutes, sometimes it's 10 minutes, sometimes it's an hour, but just getting that like early morning sunlight to regulate my circadian rhythm, getting outside, breathing in fresh air, having time to just like collect myself, to think, to pray before I like jump into the day. And then like the weighted vest just feels so good too, and really helps with strength and kind of makes it pack a punch a little bit more than just like a normal walk.
For sure.
And those are, you can get those on Amazon for so cheap. So I love my morning walks, love my sauna. I used to have a very regimented routine where I would do like all these things. And ever since I had our third son, it hasn't been regimented at all. It's just kind of like depending on the day, I'll fit in what I can on that day, and it always looks a little different. But yeah, the walks are kind of the one staple, the one constant.
That's real. That those are both really two great pieces of advice. I even in being in Paris, I didn't know all that research on being in the parasympathetic state in a sauna. I think there's something about just the stress reduction of all that. We live in this like go-go environment, social media. People are on social media all day, and then they're like at work, and then they're going from here, commuting, got the kids here, doing that, and hobbies and all that. And just taking that time, even getting that time away to just like relax and sit and let your body detox, man, that alone would just have so many mental health benefits, I'd imagine.
Totally. Yeah. We're not still enough these days. We're constantly going and doing and just like being inundated with information and to-dos. So yeah, finding like that place of solitude, I think, is so important.
So let's say, people hear like, oh, you have a hyperbaric chamber. Like I can't afford that. I can walk, but let's kind of end here. There's people aren't going to do everything you mentioned probably today, but maybe let's say they want to do a couple things and they're ready to start. And you mentioned deodorant, but are there like 2 or 3 other things you say, hey, if I was going to do anything for my health, whether it's my skincare or otherwise, what are the top 2 or 3 things I should consider doing to take charge of my health?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the cool thing. Like there is a lot that we can do without like investing in some of these more costly things. Like, and that for us like hasn't been an overnight thing. I mean, we've been on this journey for overall, I mean, almost like 15 years now. And so these are all things that we've like kind of added in over time. And but there's so much change that can happen from just like starting with the basics. And so I always think it's so cool, like that God has provided us with so many ways to heal just in his creation. So I mentioned like the sun, the light, like light intake is something that is completely like we've gotten it so wrong, along with so many other things in our modern world. But like we're staying up late, looking at screens, and our light intake is just completely dysregulating our hormones, which affect so many different systems within our body. And so if we can regulate our light intake, that is an amazing place to start. And one of the best ways to do that is to get early morning sunlight. That's going to set your circadian rhythm up to be balanced throughout the day so that you're awake when you need to be, alert when you need to be, and then so that your sleep hormones can kick in when they're supposed to, so that you can get a really restful night's sleep. And so for me, that looks like getting early morning sunlight and then avoiding screens at night, or even like I wear red light, like blue blocking glasses. You can get those on Amazon, or I like Blue Blocks for that. That's my favorite brand. But those are such a worthwhile small investment that people can make that will really impact their health, their hormones in a positive way. Grounding, I think it's so amazing that the earth, like God made the earth to actually like heal us and to provide us with negative ions that combat all of the positive charges that we get from our phones or computers. If people can get outside in the morning and just like, whether it's a walk with grounding shoes, I wear a brand of grounding shoes called Bahe. I wear those on my morning walks, but even just like getting outside, sitting or standing on the dirt, the grass, the cement, getting early morning sunlight, standing there barefoot, drinking your coffee. If you can do that for like 10 minutes in the morning, that's huge. That's going to like have a huge impact on your health with the grounding and the sunlight and the fresh air. And then, with products, I think deodorant is the best place to start. And then I think like one change will kind of like start the process and the momentum. And like you can choose to be overwhelmed by it all and just say, I don't care, like I'm just gonna keep using the products that are sold on store shelves. But it's like I talked about earlier, if you choose that, you can't expect a different outcome than what the general public is experiencing health-wise, which is not good. And so we have to make intentional choices. We don't have to do a complete overhaul right away, but we do, I think, have a responsibility to steward our bodies well and to make different choices where we can at a pace that feels good and not overwhelming to you. And so I think deodorant's a good place to start.
That's such great advice. Yeah, it's amazing how simple things like you mentioned, hey, when the sun goes away, your eyes don't need to be lit up. It messes with your hormones. Your body is so in sync with the created order of the world, and God designed it that way. We mostly were grounded throughout history, and now we have to sort of go, oh, I need to touch the earth. Like I need to figure out ways to touch the earth in order to be healthy. Like that's clearly good evidence of God's design. That's wonderful advice. Bethany, where can people learn more about you, find Primally Pure online?
Yeah, Primally Pure is, our website is primallypure.com. On Instagram, we are at Primally Pure. And then Grounded Wellness is the name of our podcast. You can listen to that wherever you podcast. And then my personal Instagram is Bethany J. McDaniel.
Awesome. All the links to those things will be in the show notes. Bethany, thank you so much for being on. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Eddie. This was great.